Hi everybody. So today we have a very old question which was asked in the year 2008 from the topic of enzyme catalysis. Very good question. But then we need to use an assumption without which we cannot solve. Okay, so let's start. The mechanism of enzyme catalyzed reaction of a substrate to yield product P is. So they have given some enzyme catalyzed reaction and corresponding to which they have given the rate of disappearance of the substrate, right? So this is the rate of disappearance of the substrate that they have given. Now, if a very small amount of S, very important, if a very small amount of the substrate is converted to the product, the maximum rate for the reaction will be observed for following options are given. Okay. So already they have given the rate of disappearance of the substrate. Correct. So this is where we'll start from. So over here, what are we going to assume? We are going to assume that, see, they have given that only small amount of S is converted to P, very small amount. So what we'll say is this small amount, that means something has been converted to the product, but the small amount of the substrate which is being converted to P, we'll assume that the amount converted to P is approximately 0 because only a very small amount has been converted. So we'll say that it is almost 0. And the concentration of the substrate at this point is equal to initial concentration of S. I hope you have understood this. That means in the question, they have given that only a small amount has been reacted to form the product. So we'll assume that the product formed is nearly 0. And the amount which is there left of the substrate is still initial concentration of the substrate, which is S naught. Okay. So we'll use this assumption in order to solve this. Now let's put these values in this equation. So what do we get? This is of course the rate that is equal to K1, K2, the substrate concentration for which they have asked, we have assumed it to be the initial concentration, minus K inverse, K minus 2 into the product concentration we have assumed to be 0 divided by K1 initial concentration of the substrate plus K inverse 2 into 0 plus K inverse plus K2 into initial concentration of the enzyme it is. So once I put these values, these get cancelled. And what is remaining? This is equal to K1, K2, S naught, E naught divided by K1, S naught plus K inverse plus K2. This is my rate. Now come back to the question, what they have asked. They have asked for the point where maximum rate is observed. Now, you know what is the equation for R max? R max is simply K2 into the initial concentration of the substrate. And this is the equation that we have, wherein K2 into initial concentration of the of the enzyme. So in order to get the maximum rate, this should be equal to K2 into initial concentration of the enzyme. Correct? This is what we have to get. So how do we get that? I can write it as K1 S naught into R max it is. So our rate should be equal to R max divided by K1 S naught plus K inverse plus K2. Now let's go back to the options. See in the options, what have they given? They have given the correlation between K inverse K2 and K1 S0. So some way I have to make this whole thing 1 so that my rate becomes R max. How can I make that? I can make that only when my K1 S naught is very much higher than K inverse plus K2. So when my K1 S0 is very much higher than K inverse plus K2, my rate becomes equal to K1 S0 into R max, which is K2 into E0, divided by K1 S0 plus a value which is neglected because the value is very small. Now K1 S0, K1 S0 gets cancelled and my rate is now equal to my maximum rate of the reaction. So when you assume that at any point of time that they have given that only a small amount of S is converted, we'll assume that, let's say, from out of 100, only 0.0001 units of reactant has been reacted, of the substrate has been reacted. So this is approximately equal to 100. So we have taken the concentration of S as S0 and the concentration of P as nearly 0. And to get R is equal to R max, we'll put this relation. K1 S0 is very much higher than K inverse plus K2, and hence our correct answer is option B. K1 S0 is very much higher than K inverse plus K2. Correct answer is option B. Okay, personally, I loved this question. So see you in the next. Bye.